So, we have an incredible lineup of speakers today, each of whom brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to the table. So, I'll just start off by introducing them. First, we have Anant Narayan Narsimhan, the head of enterprise IT at Himalaya Wellness. Anant has over 30 years of experience and has spearheaded several major digital transformation initiatives at Himalaya, from implementing SAP R3 to overseeing their migration to SAP RISE. His leadership has truly been transformational in the IT landscape. We also have Sunil Gupta, founder and managing directors of Innoval Digital Solutions. Sunil is a serial entrepreneur and an expert in SAP solutions with a deep understanding of enterprise software, digital banking, and taxation. He has built and scaled successful businesses, providing SAP compliant solutions to large enterprises worldwide. Last but not the least, we have Ashish Kumar, our in-house expert and our host for today's session. Ashish is the Vice President of Enterprise Sales at Vyana. With over 2 decades of experience in supply chain management and enterprise sales, he is passionate about leveraging technology to drive digital and financial inclusion. Now that we've introduced our speakers, I'll hand over things to Ashish to guide us through today's session. Ashish, over to you. You're on mute, Ashish. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Akshay. Thank you so much for the introduction. And thank you, Mr. Anand. Thank you, Mr. Sunil, for joining. Warm welcome to all the participants here. So, topic of discussion today is, mastering GST compliance. So, for a couple of those who are, not at all, conversant with the GST landscape, I'll just give a couple of minutes, background around it. So, the story started in 2017 when 1st July the GST was implemented in India. So the government decided that the different states have different tax structures, VAT, octroi, and all that other surcharges sector. So they need to do away with all of these and bring in a uniform tax structure pan India. So apart from liquor and fuel, everything else was brought under the GST regime. Why these two were left out is a story in itself. Perhaps both of them give you a kick. So these were left out. But anyway, so GST came in 2017, and the uniformity in all the tax structure pan India was implemented. But the challenges were many. So first of all, for example, the corporates have to file a tax return. So where do they go to file a tax return? Earlier, there used to be a VAT office in your state or your district headquarters where you would file the returns on a paper, etc. But now you had a uniform structure, so there was a digital way provided on, let's say, gst.gov.in. But if thousands and thousands of corporates would be logging in at the same time on the GST network, obviously the site was bound to crash. And it did crash a couple of times, in fact. So the smarter way that was thought around it was to provide APIs, so application programming interfaces. So because all the corporates use some or the other type of ERP, for example, so these ERPs should be able to talk to the GST network. So those APIs were to be provided to the corporates. But then the government also had a challenge that how will they service this thousands or lakhs of corporates for providing the APIs. So the concept of GST Suvidha Provider, that is the GSP, that came into being. So those GSPs were licensed by GST network to provide APIs to the corporate clients. So certain APIs that were exposed by the GST network, so this could be extended to the corporates via the GST channel. So every corporate could sign up with one or more of those GSPs and avail of this tax filing or maybe downloading their returns and tables, etc., from the GST network without the need to log into a site and waste the bandwidth, etc. Slowly, the e-way bills and e-invoicing also came through. In 2020, e-invoicing came in that 500 crores, corporates having 500 crore turnover or more, they need to file an e-invoice. So e-invoice is basically you make an invoice and then you post it to an NIC server, and the NIC server will return you with a invoice registration number, IRN, and along with that, a QR code. So that QR code and IRN number, which will be printed on the invoice, that became an e-invoice. So the e-invoice data would be auto-populated to your GST register, sales register. So your buyer can, have a visibility that how many invoices is coming through from this e-invoice network. Slowly, the limit was reduced from 500 crores to 100 crores, and last year, in August, it was brought down to 5 crores. So any corporate who is having a turnover of 5 crores or more, or is likely to have 5 crores or more in this current financial year, that was mandatory for them to file an invoice for all their B2B invoices. So wherever you are selling to another business, which has to, claim input tax credit, ITC. So those cases, you have to file e-invoice. So that is how the NIC landscape came into being for providing e-waybill and e-invoicing service to the corporate clients. So, and somewhere down the line, NIC understood that having a single server was a matter of concern. It's a single point of failure. So they gave licenses to private IRPs also, invoice registration portals, to also provide those services. So 4 IRPs also have a license nowadays, act as an IRP. And then slowly NIC also came out with another server of their NIC2 to aid in this volume of services. So that in a nutshell is what the GST compliance is all about as on day to day. So now starting a discussion. First of all, Mr. Anand Narayan, I'll start with you if you can. Please help us, walk us through some of the common, missteps that enterprises encounter when it comes to GST compliances. Especially in the areas of reconciliation and invoicing, and how do they impact your business, any business, for example. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Ashish and team and Vayana team, Akshaya, Aman. Thank you for having me on this panel and giving me an opportunity to refresh what we have been doing and also to understand what's happening also in the future and what is the kind of trends that are happening. And also greet my co-panelist, Mr. Sunil Gupta. So, Ashish, the whole thing that you put the historical background about how this is come into being. So this itself was a big challenge for everybody. That's something new that we are going to do, and it is going to be mostly digital. So it is no more the old historical way of working, traditional way of working with paper and going through your audits and reconciliations with all that paper files and everything. So everything was getting completely digitized, and the challenge that like you said in the beginning was how do we get this thing to be simplified. So the whole key word is simplicity. So here again, when we designed our own, try to figure out how we will handle this. We also went through a lot of evolution of how we started off and then how we have reached here today. So the most important thing that we understood is that uh, try to use the simple methods and which are more reliable methods of processing the invoices. So e-invoice when it was initially was there, I think there was no IRN number and all that. Today we have IRN number and all that on the e-invoice. So there is an evolution happening. As the evolution is happening, we are learning and this thing. But the main thing that I would stress upon is that if the volume there is a also a lot of volume of invoices you may think, but every invoice needs some processing time. If you go back to your original way of doing, like uploading it yourself on the government portal, trying to get the e-way bill, there is going to be a lot of challenges which you will face, and accuracy also can sometimes you may miss doing certain steps. So a more reliable way that we decided was that everything should be completely digital. There should not be any step which is in between manual then digital. So always try not to do that. So this part I will do manually, this part I will do digitally will not work, because at the end of the day, the reconciliations and trying to figure out where we have missed something will not work. So a simple service provider. Sorry about that. So simple thing to do is find a complete solution, end-to-end solution, where from the point where you are generating the digital invoice to the point where your reconciliation happens, everything should be interwoven, so that the data flows seamlessly and there is audit trail. There is also efficiency. So API is the more efficient way of handling, as we found out over the period of the last few years and beyond, that the earlier methods that we used to do and now what we are doing is really there has been a great evolution using API based solutions. So that is my simple take on or the inputs uh, on the way how it is handled.
Perfect. Now, Mr. Sunil, continuing from here only. So you have been involved in making, ERP-facing software solutions which integrate with various, ERP solutions like SAP and others. So typically on this problem of reconciliation, for example, so your solutions, so how do they, help in detection of the mismatches, and what can the role in automation can play, the API integration can play in minimizing these errors?
Yeah, thanks, Ashish, and thanks for the opportunity for being part of this panel. Happy to be here. Now, yes, it's a very valid scenario. Well, I think you have touched that once in 2017, the GST was introduced, one nation, one tax. There were a lot of taxes which were subsumed into one. So one of the biggest challenge, which earlier one was it was a manual filing. Second was there were too many taxes. So we, at the enterprise application side, we had a lot of these tax calculation engines, tax calculation calculator, which used to work backward and, bring it around on invoices and all so on. So now, after the GST got introduced, obviously there was a need for adopting those compliances and how the ERP is going to take care. So as a solution provider, what we did was we created a real-time application where as soon as in your ERP, let's say it could be SAP or Oracle or Microsoft, as soon as you generate sales registers are generated, or when you purchase, your purchase registers are generated. And those are finally the two major registers which are required to create or submit any kind of a taxation document. Now, as you said that the GSP was a conduit to file and to submit those documents. So the API integration helped a lot because it has helped in terms of real-time integration. As soon as the billing document is, let's say, created in SAP, this with the same kind of an API, which is called RESTful API, we are able to communicate directly from the ERP system to the government portal via GSP without coming out of the system. So one was the end-to-end integration. Now, answering your question of reconciliation, finally, while compliance is for the government, but the reconciliation is for the business, how to claim the input tax credit, because that is where the CFOs are more interested. While compliance is must, statutory, you have to embrace it. This is good for the government. But what is important is to do a input tax credit claim. Now, the various challenges in these were, initially there were a lot of manual processes, and when your supplier was filing his GSTR1, which becomes a GSTR2A, there was a delay in that. Then you do a manual reconciliation of all those invoices, and on the top of the complication was again an amendment and cancellation. Now there are two challenges here in ERP system. One is that you have a sales and purchase register of your own, and the supplier has their own sales and purchase register. Now, when you want to reconcile, obviously there are misrepresentation of the invoice numbers, the date periods, the amount period, and it was very difficult to reconcile manually. For example, sometimes the date will come dash, sometimes it will come slash, sometimes it will come zero becomes O. Now, what we did as a solution provider was we created an algorithm within the ERP with various rules. So whenever the GSTR2A is fetched, which is the invoice data matches with the purchase register, we were able to identify those areas of which are mismatched, and then also communicate to the vendor directly that this is an invoice which is mismatched, and that is where he has to correct it again and then again. So the reconciliation improved over the time by building those kind of a scenario which were a regular failure. Otherwise, manually it is humongous task to reconcile the data, and if you don't do it correctly, it can incur huge losses of unclaimed input tax credit. So yes, integration of API solved the problems of fetching the data of 2A. Integration of ERP helped us in terms of comparing. And third is we built an algorithm to create a mismatch and then communicating back to the vendor of the mismatches, and then of course the ITC claim. So yeah, the API, without the API is not possible, in fact, because you cannot do record by record fetching. You need to fetch the massive record, and sometimes some of our customers, they have 10 lakhs of records in a day itself, especially the beverages company. So you need to have an automation, and that is possible through an API, which helps us in terms of fetching from the GSTN portal, as well as in the backend integrating with the ERP system.
Yeah, that's great. So automation helps reduce manual workload also, and it improves efficiency and accuracy also.
Yeah,
correct. So some new development that has happened in the last month itself is in the 54th GST Council meeting. This B2C e-invoicing is also being discussed here. So it is said that a couple of sectors in a couple of states, they will be starting with a pilot project, and it would be voluntary first of all. But the writing is on the wall that maybe in a year or two it will be extended to all the sectors. And maybe again, as in the B2B, they started with 500 crores, they would be starting with some higher value and then slowly coming down. So we can very well say that maybe in a year or two, it would be pan-India or, just about all B2C sectors also, major B2C sectors. It could be coming through. So some of the businesses have B2B sales also, and now they would be doing B2C sales also on an e-invoicing. So from an industry perspective, Mr. Anand, I just wanted to understand this. Let's say, for example, in Himalaya Wellness case only. So there are large, huge volumes of transactions that you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So what sort of preparation the businesses have to do to prepare for this shift? And how do you expect the inclusion of these B2C transactions that will affect the businesses compliance? B2B also, and now they will be doing some B2C also, because the whole objective is that if I bought something from let's say Himalaya Wellness store, I need to know that whether the GST of this invoice has actually been paid by Himalaya Wellness or not. So that sort of challenge. How do you see corporates preparing for this shift? Please unmute yourself.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that's going to be a little bit of a challenge for everybody, because now we are talking about uh, a smaller, what do you call, footprint with a small volume of value of invoices, also having to push for example, even a 50 rupees, 20 rupees invoice also will have to be pushed to create an invoice. That is what I understood from what you said. So yes, that is going to be a challenge. But again, here technology is going to be the major role. I foresee that is where we will be able to overcome this challenge by getting the integration with APIs from service providers who have actually, the service providers would create the ecosystem. because with their access to the data that is available and these resources available in the back end, they would probably come up with some kind of a simplifying the solution and making it easier for us to have real-time access to these kind of portals and APIs, so that this can be overcome. But yes, we need to identify the strategy that they are going to adopt, because in one way, if you look at it, we cannot disrupt the way we are doing business with customers. For example, a small store somewhere in one store where we are having, let us say in Jayanagar, a small store which is our own store and we sell products. So there are going to be customers who are going to come in who are not actually going to pay, have any business. They are direct consumers, right? So we only have to pay claim the GST thing and pay it to the government. We don't get any returns on that because they are not going to pay the GST. But to create, let us say they say that you have to create the e-invoice number, right? Today also we do that. So that challenge will still continue. But if you are looking at the B2C e-commerce portals also having to do it online real time, then there is a challenge that we need to address, which will also, I guess, somewhere it will come through the ecosystem.
So yeah, so one good thing is that unlike a B2B invoice, you will not be having an IRN number and QR code to be printed on the invoice. So that is where, Mr. Sunil, I want to ask that, like for example, in a normal retail store, you have a POS machine, point of sale machine. So do you think that these POS machines will need to be integrated with the invoicing softwares, which would be carrying the data, or it would be like an offline mechanism where the whole day's invoices would be clubbed together and then sent it to a back office, and then back office will be posting maybe in the middle of the night somewhere, something like that. What do you think is good?
So as I think you said it very clearly that of course initially government started with B2B with 500 crore, they went to 5 crore, and now the only thing which was remaining was the B2C. The B2C volumes are higher, though value of each of the invoices may be smaller. Now, these B2C invoices are typically generated at the point of sales, POS in various retail stores or shops. Now, what was happening earlier? By the way, B2C was already being generated even now today by the enterprises, but it was not going to the government portal. There was a self-generated QR code, right? So anyone who is doing a B2C sale, they need to print a QR code, but that was generated self, with an algorithm with SHA 65 and 265 algorithm. Now, with the integration of the government portal where validation of B2C is required, there are a couple of challenges. One is that, it has to be real time. That means the API need to be available. The latency of API should be less, because a customer who is on the queue buying a shoe or a toothbrush, he will not wait for a minute or two for getting his invoice validated by the government portal, and then so the challenge, of course, is that the point of sales today are very heterogeneous in terms of their hardware also. Every supplier who is having a point of sales, the way they use the infrastructure, the hardware is different. So we need to have a homogenization of the infrastructure of point of sales also, which is compliant to the protocol which government will dictate. That is one. Second is that the real-time integration has to happen, so the latency in terms of has to be important. Third is that, yes, a small store may not have enough infrastructure to connect internet and go to the GSTN portal. So both the models need to be there. That means you are able to generate a B2C invoice QR code, but at the end of the day, it has to sync with the government. And if there are rejection, obviously that need to be corrected. But you cannot go to the customer to correct that invoice. You have to do a self-correction, and self-declaration will come into the picture there. So the challenges are the point of sales harmonizations or heterogeneity, the real-time integration, the volume of the transaction, and lastly is also, yes, of course, the reconciliation where enterprise need to also pull that data. While one part of is the communication with the government portal, the second part is the storage of that B2C invoices in your own infrastructure or in your ERP system. That also need to be stored and then finally reconciled with the total B2B and B2C going forward. So these are what I feel going to be the challenges. But maybe, like while e-invoice was introduced, government will give some kind of a cooling period for stabilizing this whole system. They will give a couple of months that you experiment that, and then once that is there, they will fine tune it and then bring it to some. So online, offline synchronization, volume of data, QR code integration, and issuing specification for manufacturing POS with the compliant protocol of government is something what I see from the industry point of view are the challenges. Yeah.
So you rightly said, talk about the volume of transactions, low in value, high in numbers that will be. So that is actually, I wanted to discuss. Like for example, if you're generating maybe 100 invoices in day today in B2B, you'll be generating 1,000 or tens and thousands of invoices in B2C. For example, if you're making a pizza chain, so pizza chain would be doing maybe 100 transactions from the warehouse to the stores, but each store will be making 1,000 invoices a day. So that is nothing. So where NIC acted smart and they had NIC 1 and NIC 2 already in place before this exponential rise in invoicing volume came in. And something very smart they did a couple of months back, that this NIC 1 and NIC 2 were two standalone servers. But lately they have clubbed the two in terms of the authentication token required to access these. So practically now NIC1 and NIC2 interoperability is available. So so Mr. Anand here, again, I want to seek your, first of all, comments on this. So with this NIC1 and NIC2 getting interoperable, so do you think this will help in maintaining uninterrupted invoicing 24/7? With the backup system now available as NIC2, in case NIC1 fails, you could, then go on to generate on NIC2.
Yeah, so would that be automatic or not is something that we need to see, because when you're sending a token and you're sending it to NIC1 or NIC2, what is the mechanism that it will use to reroute it to NIC2? So that is something that we are still not very sure how it will work. But if that is how it is going to work, there is a mechanism that will reroute it to NIC1 or it, depending. In fact, you should also look at it from like a load balancing kind of thing also. It's not necessarily fallback, but load balancing also. So if it can reduce the turnaround time, milliseconds, whatever we are using today, if it is reduced further, then there will be a lot of impact on how we are going to be able to use it. So that mechanism, how it is going to be, we will need to kind of study it. But we also look forward to having, I mean, why only NIC 1 and 2? Why can't it be a little bit more node based across this thing, and also with servers at nearer to my point of work. Let us say nodes, city within the state or whatever it is. If those nodes can be enabled through whatever mechanism, that will reduce a lot of burden on the whole ecosystem.
So just to give you some context, that Vaina as a GSP, we are always working on these problems statements only. So we have lately developed an interoperable mechanism wherein even though you will be sending us an encrypted data, still if one NIC fails, then we can direct it to NIC2 seamlessly. So we're doing currently in the sandbox testing, and shortly we'll be releasing it on production.
So Ashish, I think that is why I told you once, remember that we don't see any issues. Probably you are handling all this, so we don't see all this because it's automatically getting handled. But otherwise, it would have been a real pain.
So, Mr. Sunil, again here talking on ERP softwares. So one thing is that the ERP softwares upgrade to offer switching from NIC 1 to NIC 2 without any intervention required. And the second solution is that the GSP which is carrying the data, they are able to make that switch from NIC 1 to NIC 2. So how do you compare the two solutions? Especially in the on-premise solutions that are installed. The ones on the cloud can still be maybe to some extent, but thousands of on-premise solutions that are there, it will take a lifetime to upgrade all of these. So between an ASP solution or a GSP solution for switching.
So Ashish, this is a very valid and a very relevant question. Thanks for asking. Now, e-invoicing is so critical that if you do not able to generate e-invoicing, you can't do sale, that the business gets stopped, right? It is as critical. So it is like a business continuity planning activity also. That means your e-invoicing, your invoice should keep on generating uninterrupted way. Now, there are various point of failure. Point of failure could be your ERP itself. Point of failure could be a GSP itself. Point of failure could be the government. Now, the fault tolerance need to be built at all those 3 point of failure. Now, at the ERP level, of course, now the way infrastructure has been built, whether there's SAP or any other ERP, there are mechanisms where the infrastructure doesn't fail, the processes doesn't fail. In case if the processes fail, there are different processes which can take over. So what we have as a solution provider have done before this new NIC 1, NIC 2, IRP 1, IRP 2 was introduced, we were building a BCP plan. That means if one channel fails, automatically it switches to another channel. And that is how we had built in the software program. But now, as Anand sir also said, there are, while business continuity planning is one, the load sharing is also important. That means the latency, the proximity of your business infrastructure with the government portal. Like in your TV network, we have something called CDNs. CDNs gives a faster response because the networks are located in the proximity of where the consumer are. So that another infrastructure can also help. But nevertheless, the fault tolerance from NIC 1, NIC 2, which were earlier, like it was not in our control. Now with this availability of these 2 servers, and I understand Bayana is working on that, automatically switching, and we will not come to know from the enterprise software side whether NIC 1 has failed or not. But it is important because in the past, we have realized that when one fails, the business stops. We don't know whether ERP has gone bad, GSP has gone bad, or a government has gone bad. Now with this, at least we are reducing the point of failures. We are creating an uninterruptible kind of a e-invoice generation. And lastly, of course, the business has to run 365 a day, 24/7. So there has to be a mechanism in which we need to ensure, and then that is how this API is going to be useful. Now, how that is going to happen? Obviously, we have already done the testing along with you in your sandbox. It is a seamless exercise. We just need to point the what in our IT term we call it the URL into that particular thing, and then it takes care of that. Even if the token was generated from one server, that same token get routed through another server, and so that there are no data loss in between, and it takes care of the seamless integration. So yeah, I think this is something which is very, very relevant. And we were doing all jugaad earlier by creating the backup business continuity plan. But with this, I think it solves a lot of the pain points of e-invoice not getting generated because of the faulty of point of sale or point of presence of these 3 points. Yeah.
This has come just at the right time, that before the B2C invoicing, comes into play. So we are ready for the infrastructure here. So something which was, quite unheard of in the earlier days, that, we used to chase, the infrastructure used to chase the demand. Now here, it is in place before the demand is really, yet to pick up. So that's great, something, really understand that. And some other, by our own, industry interactions, we have come to see some, friction in the e-way bills space also. So, Mr. Anand, can you specify some challenges that you face in the e-way bills management, or, the delay or the kind of work you have to do to generate or regenerate or edit those e-way bills. So, what's your personal experience here?
Yeah, of course, that was a big nightmare. Initially when it came, it was really a big nightmare. And see, the data that we wanted to get on the e-way bill and what was expected, sometimes there was a mismatch in the requirement itself. So we had to struggle with the way that we had to generate the equivalent. Like Sunil said, we are looking at business continuity. We can't let the business to stop just because of these reasons. So earlier we used to just print and hand it over, and the guy would take the goods and go. But today, without this bill, he can't set foot outside the factory or the go down. Now, so critical it is, but even today, I think if there is anywhere there is something that can be done better, it is the e-way bill that has to be addressed. But it has been addressed to a large extent. But yes, there is still a lot of scope to do in the e-way bill. There is a lot of scope.
I came across one client of ours who said that they keep on loading the vehicles during the day, but they dispatch them only in the night time, when the traffic on the roads is less. So in that case, along with the invoice they are generating the day, they generate the e-way bill also. But at the time when the vehicle is getting exit from the gate, then at that time they take a printout of the e-way bill and give it to the driver, because if an RTO person is anywhere on the road, he would not be convinced just by the e-way bill number on the invoice. He needs to see a real hard copy of the e-way bill, although he should have a scanner to scan the QR code. But the way it is functioning is that there is a need for a hard copy. So I said, how do you generate the hard copy? They said they log into the system, government portal, and then they download the e-way bill. But which I believe is pretty risky of sort, that somebody has a login at the security gate to generate the PDF copy, the printout of the copy. So for example, like Vaina has generated a API to generate a PDF of the e-way bill itself. So Mr. Sunil, from a software perspective, can you shed some light that how API automation here can help the businesses again?
Yeah, I think this is again a very good question, Ashish. If you see the evolution of this whole e-invoice came first, e-way bill came first, and then e-invoice. Now, technically, in e-way bill, you need e-invoice data also. Yeah, so you need that information. So the challenge was, of course, these two systems came independently. Then the challenge came that how, with the same B2B invoices, can we generate e-way bill together? And that is where the API has helped. Today, we do not sell e-invoice and e-way bill separately. It is the same because the process is same. So that is how the API is enabled to generate. Now, right from generation to storage to transmission. Now, as I think Anand sir said, if e-way bill is so important that without that document, a truck cannot move forward. So the challenge was, of course, if there are thousands of e-invoices to be printed or to be, the e-way bill to be printed, the one way which is also government has agreed, and I think to large extent, is that a PDF copy, just a simple PDF, not a printed copy, is good enough. And an inspector on the road or surveillance on the road, they can just scan and then check whether this is a genuine e-way bill or not. So the objective of having a printed document is getting reduced as we move on a paperless, where a QR code, which is printed on that, can be scanned. The second challenge which was there was that, see, if you see in the e-way bill, there are two parts. One is a part A, which is more related to the place of supply, items, HSN code, and so on. Part B is related to the transporter. Now, while you as a supplier, you have all the data what you are dispatching, but at the gate, some other truck getting that load, of that particular consignment. Now, so
Transshipment also.
Transshipment also. So part B filling was also a challenge. in terms of you need to fill the driver's name, the vehicle's name, and so on. But that is also now with part B getting automated in terms of the transporters are also now intelligent enough to, if the company doesn't have the truck details, he is able to do it, and then the truck moves on so on. So that is also, even by the way, I've seen drivers when he loads in the truck, he has an app now, and he input the part B data of the the vehicle numbers and details on the which was not possible earlier. Earlier, the driver was waiting because that fellow is on, like, pardon me of my language, they are unpad, they are not educated enough. But now with the small clicks of an app, he is able to fill in because his truck number is filled in, his driver name is filled, his driving license is filled, everything is there. You just have to click in. So that has solved the process of both part A and part B. And last is the storage. See, finally, e-invoice or e-way bill, whatever you have generated, it has to come to an enterprise application for the reconciliation, for the inventory, for the matching of, and that is where from generation to the storage, the application has evolved in terms of building that robust e-way bill processes, and that's how even the current, as I think Anand sir said, now there are no more hardship what we used to face earlier with our customers. Yeah.
So apart from this e-way bill that is there, so a lot of corporates nowadays are demanding that the invoices that they receive, they need to verify those invoices also. So this invoice verification requirement is also coming up because a lot of fraud is on the rise these days. People submit invoices which are actually not a valid invoice, especially in banks or FIs. If you have to apply for a loan or any credit against your supply chain. So these invoice verifications are also now a big requirement of the day. So Mr. Sunil, so what else, how can API integration help here also to minimize the workload in invoice verification workflows?
Yeah, so I think invoice
verification is the requirement. Minimal intervention, maximum automation.
See, I'll talk of two stages. One is the stage pre-1st of October 2024. From 1st of October 2024, things are going to be different, by the way. Only 3 days have gone. Before that, the invoice used to come. Invoice, if a supplier is 5 crore or above, he used to send a PDF document or he may send e-invoice. It is a responsibility of a customer to check the legality using either the QR code scanning or even extraction of that, and also checking with their purchase order and as well as their GRN and all those, what we call 3-level matching. It was tough. Now, government has recently introduced from 1st of October, they call it Invoice Management System, IMS, which I'm sure Vaina is already working on that. It allows you as a customer to check on the portal, either manually or through API also, that I am ready to accept this invoice, I'll reject this invoice, these are pending. And that is how this whole verification process also is eased out. It has another advantage because finally, whatever you have accepted those invoices, that only you can do for input tax credit claim. So it is solving both the problem. One is the legality of the invoice, because if the supplier has submitted the invoice and it is there on the portal, you have seen it, that guys, this is a genuine, I accept it. The acceptance is there. And so second is that once I'm accepting it, when 3B is filed, up to that point of time, whatever is there, I can take a input tax credit claim. So this system is getting introduced from 1st of October. We have to see how it evolves. So genuineness of invoices are done by 2 ways, on the portal itself and also when they extract and then compare. Now we are trying to do at the source itself. So as soon as the GSTR1 of a supplier is filed, that visibility is already there of his invoices, which can be accepted, rejected, or kept it pending. Yeah.
So just to add to what Sunil said, this is possibly the biggest, pain point going to be addressed in the entire system.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, ITC credit and reconciliation are the biggest pain point, and this is like mitigating everything upfront, even before the invoice is coming to my system.
Correct.
There are 2 things that I need to know: whether this is a genuine e-invoice. Secondly, if the vendor is actually supposed to give me an e-invoice or not.
Yeah, that is also can be checked.
As per the norms, he's supposed to give me an invoice or not, because otherwise the credit, taking the credit of ITC credit will be a challenge.
Yeah.
I think I agree. This while it will be evolving, I think this will be something which will be very interestingly and closely, keenly observed by the entire industry. Wants to adopt this.
Absolutely. So again, ERPs and ERP facing softwares, they need to upgrade. They need to integrate with the IMS and APIs that will be exposed by the GST network for the same. So that's absolutely true. Automation here would again be very, very helpful in reducing your reconciliation loads. And of course, input tax credit, that is most important. You don't want to waste a single paisa of yours, which is, you can claim. Yeah, thank you so much, gentlemen. That was a real, heart-to-heart talk on the GST compliances here. And we are running a little short on time here. And I would, ask the host to please open the panel for any questions that the participants might have. So, any question, ladies and gentlemen, please go ahead and ask. Mr. Anand and Mr. Sunil, from the software and from the industry perspective, they would be ready to take your questions here now. In the meantime, there are a couple of polls that have been floated. I hope everyone is, giving their comments in those polls. Any question from the attendees? I can see a couple of my friends who are startup founders in the list here. I'm sure they would be having a lot of these, but they might be, asking me offline, not here offline. Akshay, did you capture any questions from the audience during the webinar?
No, Ashish, we haven't gotten any questions.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe we can just wait for a minute.
Sure.
To see. If no questions, we can wrap it up. No worries.
So, before some question comes up, Ashish, the biggest pain point which has been resolved is the GSP. GSPs have taken the pains out of the integration of real time with the business application. Without those APIs, I think it would have been very, very difficult. Second is now the way it is enriched in terms of the information, in terms of the more capability of bundling together some of these functionality into one API. So in one call itself, you're able to get a lot of information. I think that has helped a lot. I'm talking more from the solutioning point of view as things evolved in terms of API integration with the business applications. Yeah. And also, one thing is there, I've seen over the last 30 years that the ERP system were not open enough, earlier. But now all the ERP systems are open. They are ready to communicate with the APIs, frameworks, and that's how also made it possible that business application can communicate real time with the government portals and I'm sure it's going to come for the other portals also, like Director General of Foreign Trade or IceGate and direct tax also. Yeah, yeah. The direct tax. Currently, direct tax is not 100% API driven, but I feel that is going to be the next once B2C is covered. The API is going to come for that, so that corporate.
So you're telling me now the direct taxes. Once I get my salary, the income tax will flow directly.
Yes. Yeah. So no, I'm talking about both direct tax for the person, direct tax for the government.
I hope the government also takes care of the returning returning of tax. That was part also simplified.
Sir, going forward, we don't have to file the return. The government is going to tell you that this is your return. You accept it or reject it. So there is no other way.
Yeah. I think see, there are two things that are going to help in the way that we are going. Like you said, the infrastructure is leapfrogging before the demand. One is that the internet bandwidth. We are looking at 5G spectrum now very shortly. Some of them have already started adopting 5G in the corporate, what do you call, ecosystem. Now, this will also bring a change in the way how we communicate. And cloud-based software is going to be the norm rather than
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
being an exception. So even those people who POS, which we spoke about, for example, our own POS, it works on the web. It doesn't work on the local thing. So there is a
Okay.
very lightweight system on the PC, and mostly it is web application that is running, which also means that it helps us to create that interface with the GSP and bring the data on real time. Like Sunil was telling, how the real-time integration can happen. So these two things are helping a lot in taking this forward quickly.
Yeah, let's see if the GSP scope can be enhanced as Mr. Sunil to EXIM also, DGFT, etc. also.
Yeah.
So, I mean, providing APIs is short solution to automation and increasing the compliances, reducing the load of compliances also. So why now, as a GSP, since 2017 we were the first ones to get a GSP license, and the way we have worked is that to have enough redundancies in our system, so that anytime there is a load increase from the client end, especially during the tax filing, so we have enough space to accommodate all the things, and that is how things have worked out well. But a lot of exciting times to come in the GSP space also, as customers are looking more and more towards GSP to provide new solutions, and as software providers increase their range of services. So it is on GSP to also evolve at the same pace. Yeah. So great.
Sure. Thank you so much. We still don't have any questions. So
Okay,
if
sure.
you all have nothing else to add, then we can end this. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of our webinar, to all the attendees, and of course, all of our panelists as well. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank
Thanks a
you.
lot.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you.